right, Jim Smalley, let's start at the very beginning. Why did you get into broadcasting? Was it by choice or happy accident?
It was a happy accident, really. My resume at the age of 17 said farm laborer. That was it. That's all I had. I had worked on the farm, and I finished high school. In grade 12, I was 16, turning 17. So I finished school early. And I spent that winter bondspieling in Corning, Saskatchewan, where I'm from, southeast of here, about 100 miles, southeast of Regina, about 100 miles. And there was an ad in the Leader Post. And I was looking for work anywhere. Didn't want to drive cab in Regina, because I didn't know the city. I couldn't drive in the city very well. And there was an ad in the Regina Leader Post. Apply for a job in radio, Fort Frances, Ontario. And no experience necessary. So I applied. And I didn't tell anybody because the mines in Thompson wouldn't take me because I was 17. I couldn't get into the armed forces because I was 17, and so my mother would have had to sign, and she wasn't prepared to do that. Even though my father had been in the Second World War as an aircraft mechanic. So there weren't many options for me. And then there's that Leader Post ad, wow! So I wrote away, and they accepted me. Only I went to Dryden, Ontario, CKDR, and it was training on the job. So most broadcasters, almost every broadcaster that I've been around, has to pay to learn the business. I was paid to learn the business. The Government of Canada had training on the job program, as long as I had registered with Manpower Canada, and I'd come up when I was unemployed after harvest was over, and I had applied for Manpower support, and therefore I was eligible to get this training on the job at Dryden. So I worked there for 5 months, learned the business, and I'll tell you, Brad, there's nothing like learning court when you're 18. Because I didn't know anything about court. And they said, go over to the courthouse and cover court. And I go over there, and I learn very quickly the judge is a king in that room. He's a king. He can do anything he wants. If he finds you in contempt, he can do that. He can send you to jail just because you didn't make him happy. So you be very listening. And also, I was also warned, you make any mistake, you lose your job. If you say something on the air out of court that's wrong, you can lose your job. So you listen very intently. So one day, after I've been in this courtroom a couple months, I'm listening very intently and making copious notes because I got to make notes because I don't want to be wrong. I never went in the courtroom and wrote a story without making notes till I had been in this business over 5 years. And that's because I forgot my notebook. But I felt comfortable writing what I did write. Anyway, so I'm in this courtroom. I'm covering a trial. And all of a sudden, it goes quiet. And I look up at the judge, and he looks down at me, and he says, "This means you." Yes, sir. And what it was there was a order of non-disclosure for the media. Media could not, because it was a preliminary hearing. It was like a rape case. And so I went, okay, that makes sense. In Regina, the rules are even, can be harsher for journalists. Now we're now allowed to record in a courtroom. That was because of the Thatcher trial. They did a study on the results of the Thatcher trial coverage, and they found the best coverage. There was a study done. The best coverage was 57%, and that was the Leader Post. So if the best you can do is 57% of a major trial, they thought they've got to let the journalists record it. You can't use it on air, but at least you could record it, and that's how you could be more accurate.
Now, you had that start,
Yep.
And then where did you move from there?
Well, after my 5-month training on the job, they moved me to the main station, Fort Frances, Ontario, down at the border. Dryden is just 600 miles due east of Regina, not far. It's Ontario, but it's not far. And then they moved me to the Fawcett broadcast chain, 3 stations, Dryden, Kenora, Ontario, and Fort Frances, Ontario. Now I'm at the border, and I'm covering border material. But they made me the late night DJ. I'd done everything in Dryden, but in Fort Frances, I was relegated to being the late night DJ, which was fine. I learned how to be a good DJ, and when you're 18, there's nothing like being a rock jock. The trouble was, a lot of it was middle of the road music, so it wasn't fun. And so you know what I mean. But because we were on the border at Fort Frances, I learned a whole new concept of broadcasting to the American side, because Fort Frances, Ontario, had a lot of American listeners. We had more listeners than the radio station on the American side in International Falls. So we did a lot of broadcasts to the Americans. So when I called the police stations at night, I had 6 police departments to call. You know, the town police in both Fort Frances and International Falls. Then I had the town sheriff there. I had RCMP in Canada side and the highway patrol on the American side. A lot of police departments to call just to find out what's going on. And what I found, the American police were incredibly open. They would tell you everything. Anything you wanted to know, they would answer it. I even called the FBI once when there was a local family kidnapping on the American side, which is really exciting to be able to call the FBI, you know, when you're not used to it.
Yeah. Now, what was the progression back to Saskatchewan?
So I'm working in Fort Frances, Ontario, and I'm not that happy. I'm homesick. I really am. I'm not that happy. I'm relegated to the evening DJ job, and I'd really enjoyed doing the newsroom. That was my favorite part. And so I decided, I saw in the local broadcaster paper that's nationwide, there was a job opening in CFSL Weyburn. I could get a job working in Weyburn. And so I applied, and it was $350 a month, and that's what I was earning in Fort Frances and in Dryden, $350 a month. So I was disappointed. Same money, you know, and I've been in this business now, you know, 11 months, and no raise at all. And so I was kind of down about it. I wasn't going to reply, but I was working with 2 boys, same age as I was, you know, the year older than I was. Because the boss's son was a year older than I was. He'd never failed a grade, and he was still in high school in Ontario. They have grade 13 in Ontario. That's why. Okay. So anyway, they both were excited for me. Jim, you can go home? Well, yeah, it's 70 miles from home, but yeah, because they were from Winnipeg and they were homesick worse than I was. But they said, but you could go home? Yeah. And so I decided to accept the offer. And I was told that I had 2 weeks to come to work. Now, I have to give 2 weeks' notice. So and my car was a 14-year-old car with no heater. And this is now February 1st. Okay. So it was cold. It was very cold. And I had fireworks in the car because I'd bought an American side or Canadian side, and you can't take it in the American side. And the easiest way to Winnipeg from Fort Frances is to take the American route. But no, I wasn't going to do that. I was going the Canadian route, which is straight north, 120 miles to the Trans-Canada, and there's one First Nation settlement in that 120 miles. And so I worked till midnight Friday. And then I drove 14 hours to get home because I drove very slow. I had an old Ford Falcon, 1960 Ford Falcon, no heater. But it could keep the frost off the windshield. That was good. But I was cold. And finally, I got the Trans-Canada and Winnipeg at 6 in the morning, I think it was. And I got home at 1:30 in the afternoon, 13-and-a-half-hour drive.
And so you got there and you were back in news.
And I got to Weyburn that Monday. So I went in Monday morning and met Jim Lang. And yeah, they said, we're going to put you in news. They're going to, give me a few instructions about news. And so I went and recorded a newscast with the news director at the time, Gary Tom, and he went up one side and down my other side. Boy, he says, you can read, but you're way too fast. Use a little inflection and try to slow down. So that really helped. That was really good guidance. And they put me on reading news within 2 weeks. Well, a month it could have been. But I was reading the afternoon news. And I did the afternoon news. And the afternoon news included a farm show. Now, in Dryden, I'd done a farm interview because there was an exchange student that came from England to work on a farm near Dryden. And so they said, exchange student's coming in, Jim. You come from the farm. You got to interview her. So what I'm going is explaining the background that I did farm news even when I started in Dryden, and then Weyburn, I did the farm show and the afternoon news. I found it a great place to learn, to work. I worked very, very hard there to learn the business. I learned the basics in Dryden, and I learned the harder news in Weyburn, and it was good. It was good.
And how long were you in Weyburn?
14 months.
14 months.
14 months. And actually, within a few months of working in Weyburn, I got a call from CKCK Radio, Frank Flegel, asking me to apply. And I didn't feel ready. And I brushed him off. I said no. It was just too big a station. It was one we'd always listen to, that, and of course, RM. So I put him off. By the next February, I'd been there a little over a year. He then asked me to please reapply. And I did. And at the time, CKRM finally had an opening. I'd been expecting to get a job at hoping to get a job at CKRM. But they had no openings. And finally, they had the opening the same week CKCK accepted me. Now, so I had these two offers all of a sudden. But CKCK radio and television would pay $50 a month more, which doesn't sound like much now, but difference between $600 or $650 a month, and also I'm doing television. I'm expanding my knowledge. I'm learning how to do television. So I did CKCK television as well as radio. And there's nothing like the consistency of what you've got. The morning news reader is reading your supper TV news. The morning sports reader is doing your supper sports. And the morning man, the mayor, Johnny Sanderson, he's giving you your weather. And then the reporters, when Mantika was at CK Radio, as I was, we're doing reports on television. You get to see us. So there's nothing like that exposure for ratings and for knowledge, background. I made this comment one time. I could do a scoop a day on radio for 20 years and nobody, who it seemed, would really acknowledge or talk about it. And I could do one story once on television, and for 2 weeks or 2 weeks to 4 months later, they would talk to me about that story. The impact was phenomenal. I loved radio for the pace, the style. Radio enabled you to do a story an hour. TV, you did a story a day. Much slower pace. And the egos in television were much bigger than radio. Much bigger egos. A fascinating difference.
Now, you were brought over in the George Gallagher era.
Yes.
Of CKRM.
No, Paul Hill era.
It was, okay.
It was the Paul Hill era, yeah.
Because Lauren Harrison spoke of you and being with you at CKCK. And
actually, Lauren had left CK when I was working in Weyburn when I heard his final shows.
Okay.
And then I Sheriff Schrag was the open line show host when I started in '75.
My mistake.
No, that's okay.
That's right. But Lauren spoke very highly of you, your work you were doing at CKCK.
Yes.
And was part of the encouragement to get you to come over to CKRM.
Yes. Well, when I came in '82, I had done television, but then Paul Hill had... he owned a TV station first. Then he bought a radio station, but he bought CKRM, the competing radio station. And so I was on, and then I was off, and then I was on for fill-in in the summertime, and then I was off. And so I wanted to come back and do television, and I'd been waiting for the farm job to open up at CKRM. And because I knew how to spell Manfred's last name, I could call him in the phone book, because I had worked with him at CKCK as well. And so I called Manfred and offered my services, and we dickered over salary and that kind of thing for a while. And then I came to start September 1st of 1982 in CKRM.
Now, you've touched on it many times, your agriculture background, your opportunity to cover agriculture news. Was that always the passion? Was that always the goal?
It was and it wasn't. I love doing news. What I found very quickly doing the farm news, it enabled me to have one certain area. Like in Weyburn, I did everything. I did all the news. when I came to Regina at CKCK and CKRM, I only had to worry about the farm news. That was just a relief because I knew the farm news. As a matter of fact, most times I knew a lot more than the news director. So I could be a self-starter. I could guide myself. I could do the farm news that I felt was important. My choice, my decision. Whereas rather than being told, these are the stories you're going to do today, this allowed me to be more self-guiding, and that's what I did, and I enjoyed that far more than just going out and doing news stories. So I love doing news, but I preferred the farm news really because it was a specialty that I knew, I enjoyed. I had a huge background in that I could help. I can talk with anybody about farming because of that. It was just fun. I also find the farming community to be a really nice community. Really, really nice and much easier to deal with than many other areas of the newsroom that you want. I mean, the old saying, can you tell a politician is lying? And his lips are moving. And I don't mean that for all politicians. I mean, there's some really good people out there. But you understand where I'm coming from.
Absolutely. And what I find interesting is, you're talking about the early 80s, and your career stretching into the 2000s, the innovations that you witnessed in the industry would have to be pretty striking.
Oh, it is incredibly striking. I've always said, my 50 years in radio, I just passed 50 years. The first 25 years roughly, was without computers at all. We didn't use computers whatsoever. The last half was with computers. And we went from, I had a stack of cartridges, we called them carts, of course, and they were like an 8-track, or think of a cassette, really. Actually, CKCK radio, that's all they had was cassettes. And to be able to have that huge stack and then to have just loaded in the computer, it enabled me to do much more faster and easier. The other thing that I loved about the computer was the editing capabilities. I would do an interview that ran 5-10 minutes, okay? And I would spend at least 20 minutes editing it because I was cutting out all my ums and ahs, and if my subject had ums and ahs in it, it was gone. You did not hear it on my air. And I would find that it saved time. Like I cut a lot of time out of an interview. If I did an 8-minute interview, it could be as low as 4 to 5 minutes. And all I did was cut out ums and ahs and doubles. You say a word twice, and I could cut out those first 2 times you said it. And because it didn't change any meaning. Now, as I also would tell people, and I would tell people that I interviewed, I can do pinpoint editing. Don't worry about what you just said. I can straighten that. And I would tell them, however, I will not change the meaning. If I change the meaning, you get fired for that. For Richard Nixon, you know how he said, I am not a crook? I can have him say, I am a crook. But you cannot change the meaning, because then you can be fired for that, and you should be. You do not change the meaning of what people are trying to get across. That was incredibly important to me.
Now, you have interviewed everyone from a local area farmer or businessman to prime minister. What's the difference? There are people that are skilled in the interview process, that are well trained in the interview process. What's the difference between them and just the average person that you want to talk to about their farm operation?
Well, of course, it's easier to interview a politician because they are gifted and polished. However, you can't get a straight answer a lot of times. Whereas a farmer will tell you to your face what's going on. They've been some people, I've talked with people that were almost offended by that. I says, you have to appreciate what the farmer is. He is the guy that has been running that operation, either with his bit of dad's guidance or by himself if his dad passed away, since he was 18. He's been his own boss. When he makes a mistake, he pays for it. So if he tells you something, he means it, because that's the way he's been all his life. If he makes money, it's because of him. If he loses money, it's because of his work, not somebody else. So politicians, of course, rely on people to vote for them. So they're going to give you to answer a difficult question, they'll give you the runaround as best they can. But a farmer will usually tell you straight to your face what's going on and why. And that's what I like about the farming community, is they will do that. And I don't worry about if they're making mistakes or something. Like I said, I edit it out. I spend 20 minutes at least on most interviews. editing it after I'm done. And I also, at first, I never bothered to write questions. I thought, just talk to someone, see what they're saying. And then I watched a feature on Barbara Walters, I've talked about Manfred Jonik. He was really the best news director I ever had. And he talked about Barbara Walters, and I watched a documentary on Barbara Walters. She didn't just agonize over her question list that she interviewed people with, she agonized over the order of her questions. So I realized preparation then doesn't hurt.
You mentioned quite a few times, learning a way to do something, being taught a way to do something, finding out a way to do something. So obviously, during that career, those 50 years, you were studying everybody else as well.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I was trying to get some guidance, how to do things, and I'm not a great writer. That's my weakness, is the writing ability. And writing news is précis writing, as you would be taught in school. It's telling a story in 40 seconds. It's not easy to tell a story in 40 seconds until you break it down like this. The first line is the lead, and that has to be a grabber, has to grab somebody's attention, because people in radio are, and I'm just going into radio business, which is good for you and I, but I don't know about the average listener. But with writing, the lead line has to be a grabber, because people that are sitting in front of a TV are watching it. They're staring at it. But in radio, they're driving a car, or they're doing the laundry, or they're vacuuming the house. They're doing something, working in the shop. They are not really paying close attention. So your lead sentence in a news story has to be a grabber, has to get somebody's attention. Then you need a line into the clip. That's your tape insert, the person that's speaking, and then one line out. And that's it. 3 lines, 20-second clip. And now that's really changed since I started. When I started in Dryden, they allowed 60-second clips. That's what we call the news insert piece, the audio piece. The clip could be 60 seconds. By Weyburn, it was more like 35, 40. When I got to Regina, it was, again, television allowed a 40-second clip, but really radio was more like 25 to 30. RM, it slowly went down. At first, I was 25, and then 20, and in the last few years, it's been a 15-second clip is the ideal, or less, 15 or less. But generally, I would tell them, look, I'm pulling these clips for the farm show, so therefore that's why it's long, because I want these for the farm show, because I would tie my news stories together, make my job easier. And
you did have full editorial content over the farm show.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It was my choice. It was what I wanted. It was, because as I told you, I tended to have more knowledge than the news director of the time, just because they weren't from the farm. I was from the farm, and I always had to be on top of things. I would watch TV news, and then I would listen to the opposition in the morning. I always had the other station on, the opposition on in the morning, to hear what they're doing. So I knew if they had a farm story, I'm going to be having it when I get in to work. The other thing is that was wonderful about my job in radio, and that I loved about being the farm news director, another reason to keep it, was my shift. Oh my goodness. Radio is famous. The shifts. Okay, the shifts in radio were with Johnny Sanderson 4 in the morning or 5 in the morning. Willie Cole was on the air at 5:30. So Willie's on it at 5:30. So you imagine you should be in an hour before to get on air. You would know that. And so you're done at 1. I mean, 5 to 1, that's your 7-8 hours. So the other shift after that for news then is what? 10 o'clock. You come in at 10 or 11. So you come in at 11 and you work till 6 o'clock or 7. Whatever the 8 hours is. Well, 6 hours. 10. They tended to be 6-7 hours shifts. But the point is, I could do 9 to 5. I could, I did the other shifts too, by the way. I did a lot of weekend news. It was overtime. And so I enjoyed that. But I'll tell you, there's nothing like, I would get up at 10 to 5 so I could be at work at 5, because otherwise I'm going to fall back to sleep. So, I'd be dressed in 3 minutes and 7 minutes here to the station.
Now, you talked about the farmer and the honesty. Your background, being raised on that farm, you also knew what that audience wanted to hear about and how they wanted to hear it. You had that direct connection and that editorial control. You really molded that program, and it expanded over the years. The program grew in length over the years as well.
Immensely. It did. It really did grow. And you brought up a really interesting point, a very fascinating point, because on the farm, my mother liked the rock and roll of CKCK radio, and my stepfather loved country music of CKRM. So we had competing things there. And the only time my stepfather would take it off CKRM was at 12:10 every day. 12:10 every day, because CKCK radio ran a taped report from the weather office giving detailed weather, and he would have to hear that. So I knew how important the weather was to the farmer. So when I come here, and later that year, it's almost like within the first year, because there was no weather forecast in the farm show. But I get a call from Environment Canada. Jim, we want to put together a forecast for the sprayers, for farmers for spraying, wind forecast. Would you run it? I said, absolutely. I want actually a more detailed weather forecast. And so that's what I did. I got a detailed weather forecast in the farm show because I knew how important it was. That's funny you say that, because that was so true. My background there, that was the classic example, why and how.
Now, you talked about innovations in broadcasting, innovations in agriculture, what you saw, the progression that you saw over those years was also pretty
Profound. Very profound. It was incredible profound. I mean, I thought I would never stop writing a story about the Canadian Wheat Board or the Crow Rate. Those were two stories that were going to be there forever. And now they're in the ashes of history. But just like Sask Wheat Pool dominated the farm news for many years. Dominated it. If I hadn't talked to the president twice that week, there was something wrong. Like, that's how much they dominated the farm news. Saskpool, they had all the dominant number of elevators. I think at one point they had over 1,000 elevators in Saskatchewan. You imagine, in this rural province? But, it was down to several hundred, 600 at one point, and it kept falling. But they dominated it. They also had, though, because there's the two key areas of agriculture. Okay, there's livestock, which I'm a little weak in because we had mostly grain. We never went into livestock till I was in high school. So I'm a little weak on, I always said that and felt that. So I always tried to overcompensate by talking to the stock growers, talking to the Cattlemen's Association, giving them good airtime and lots of airtime as much as I could. But the Sask Wheat Pool also had like 16 stockyards they owned. So they were a dominant force in agriculture in this province. I'll never forget Alan Blakeney at one point going to the Wheat Pool meeting, and I was covering it. And he said, Sask Wheat Pool's policy is this, our policy is that. They were the same thing. And he went over all points. He was following, everything the pool had. And now that's relegated to the ashes of history, too.
And the large farm shows, many of them obviously here in Regina, you were a big part of all of those as well. Covering them and being a part of them.
Oh, big time, yes. Agribition, as a matter of fact, after my 40th Agribition, and that's like over 10 years ago, they put me into their Hall of Fame, gave me a really nice recognition, and made me actually a shareholder. And that was really nice. I covered all the Agribitions, and I've been to every one of them, including the one last fall. I went down just to look around, and it was wonderful to see. But it was a massive show. Many people didn't have an understanding of how big Agribition was, and I had to try and get that out there. We had a table from the guy from France trying to sell French cattle. We had a guy from Switzerland selling Swiss cattle. And that was because. And the Gelbfie and the all the other breeds, they're just phenomenal. And they had huge foreign influence. And that was because the United States was starting to expand into non-British breeds. Like, we've always had Hereford and Shorthorn and Angus, and Red Angus, Black Angus. Charolais came out in the 50s. That's a French breed. But and they had a premium for the most part when you had Shark cross cattle. So with that, pardon me, you had the livestock end, and that's a huge component of this province. The new breeds that were coming, the Americans could not import them from Europe. Canada had the only quarantine station at Sept-Îles, Quebec. So we bring in these breeds, and once they've passed 6 months in Sept-Îles, well, they're disease-free. So the cattlemen here were bringing in these European breeds, and they were selling them in the auction at Agribition to American buyers as well as Canadian buyers.
I think you learned about cattle then.
I learned a little. Yeah, I wound up doing a history of the cattle industry and every different breed, what they were and what they meant. And so I learned a lot about all the different cattle breeds. And it was I still have that literature somewhere.
Now, changing gears just a little bit, you touched on it prior. You would fill in for Lauren Harrison on the Harrison line.
Yep.
And that's a pretty big gear shift in your broadcast day. How was that for you?
Well, what happened was they were looking for someone to produce Lauren's show. And they had nobody that seemed to last. They were lasting 6 months, and they just weren't working out. They had to leave. They were gone after 6 months. And I think that was because the very first girl, the helper, producer that Lauren had, Kathy Grant, was incredibly good, incredibly gifted. Kathy Grant, I remember listening in high school to Lauren's show. And he'd go, yeah, and we're sure wondering about that education decision. Oh, wait, what? Kathy, you've got the minister on? Oh, okay. And she would get the minister on, and you'd go, wow, that's impressive. And so he would ask the minister, what about this thing? So because she was so good, like, where did she go from Regina? She went to become a reporter in Winnipeg and became the news director at the sister station to CKCK Radio. So she was very good, and she went to Moscow and did a few reports out of Moscow. She was very good. So these producers that were coming at CKRM just weren't working out. And so in desperation or in frustration, I think Manfred said, Jim, you produce Lauren's show. So I came in early. I came in at 7:30. I was in at 7:30 to produce Lauren's show, put it together for 8:30, and then he was 8:30 to 9:30. And then I did the farm news. Then the rest, so after 9:30, my day is the farm show. But that's what I did for the first 2 hours of my day. I did the open line show, but I only produced it. And then when he went on holidays, we brought in someone to fill in. And the person to fill in, Manfred and I had to tell her about the latest issues and what was going on and who her guest was. And Manfred says to me, Jim, you may as well just do the show. It's easier. I went, okay, works for me. So I did the show on fill in for Lauren. And
in that time, that's quite a few years then that you filled in for him.
Well, I was the producer for 4 years, from 86 to 91, and then I did fill-ins at times, yes.
Okay. Now, with the involvement with when the station acquired the rights to the Saskatchewan Roughriders, almost everybody in the building had a job with the Rough Rider broadcast. Did you ever get thrown into that mix too?
No, but it is funny that you would bring that up, because I've always said, if anybody ever asked, I've always been with the Riders, always. When I started at CKCK, they had the rights to the Rough Riders in 75. When I moved in 82, CKRM had just got the rights to the Rough Riders. So I have always been with the Riders. I've always had the Riders. And the one sport I love to watch is football. I love the Riders.
So in the background, you can claim that...
I've always been with Riders, but no, I've never done any part of the broadcast. I did a football broadcast once in Fort Francis, Ontario, and I felt I was out of my league. And this was high school football. So I had no great aspirations for that.
Now, you mentioned that you still go to Agribition. You're still interested in it. I want to know, because I've seen you at some of these events, I want to know how you get from the front door to where you want to go without stopping to talk to everybody along the way, because everybody knows who you are.
Well, I walk fast sometimes, but I like to stop and talk, and I don't want to ignore anyone. If they say hi to me, I've got to stop and say hi. It's in my nature. As I've warned you, I'm a talker. I can talk forever.
Now, I'm going to mention some names, and just give me your thoughts. Willie Cole.
Great broadcaster. Could not believe the impact he had on this community. Everybody loved Willie. Everybody knew Willie. Incredible impact. He built this station up to where it became a leader, a huge leader. When I worked at CKCK, they looked at the flea market, laughed at it, and said, it'll last 6 months. I go home to the farm, and my mother and all her curling ladies, they're talking what's on the flea. And I'm going, oh, yeah, right. Yeah, sure. The ladies are laughing what's on the flea. They're listening to CKRM. So I knew that it was going to last because the impact was huge.
Another one, obviously involved with that, Fred King.
Fred, great guy. Liked Fred too. Good broadcaster. Fascinating person. Singer. What Fred did for CKRM, in my opinion now, was have his band. Now, some people would say, putting a band out in rural Saskatchewan, so what? No, you don't understand what that means. To have Willie and Fred in the hall in wherever, Windthorst or whatever. Smalley Farm was at Windthorst. That's why I mentioned the community. It's next to Corning. And the thing about having those personalities in your community is you can't buy that kind of publicity. You can't buy that. It's like the CK radio being on TV at night every day. You can't buy that kind of publicity. Having Fred and Willie out there, and also Willie did all the cookouts. You know, he went to all the cookouts. So that kind of he earned the listeners one person at a time. He made the effort.
You've talked about him, but tell a little bit more about Lauren Harrison.
Lauren was a taskmaster. You did it right. He respected you if you were good and you knew what you were doing. So you made sure you did your best. Lauren was great sound. Boy, what a great sound. Oh, my goodness. And I wish I had that kind of ability where he would take calls. I need to have somebody in front of me to talk to do an open line show. I really do. Lauren, he'd come up with an issue just out of his head that he heard in the morning, and he would talk about that issue, and he'd try and take calls. And there were the odd time, because I was his producer, he didn't get any calls. But you never knew he was repeating himself. He was saying a similar thing. But he was able to carry a conversation by himself for 20 minutes to half an hour and make it sound entertaining and good. That's a gift that I wish I had.
You mentioned many people that influenced you along the years, but you have mentioned Manfred was the best you worked for.
Yes, by far. He was just, he was so good. There was, comes to my, the guidance was good. I would write stories that, Agribition was on today. He'd say, Jim, nobody cares what was on today or a meeting was on today. What happened there? That's what's the grabber, the lead line. Remember I told you the lead line is the most important. And I'm Agribition open today? No. What happened there? The burning of the brand was the official opening of Agribition today. That catches your ear, and that's what you got to do. So it was that kind of guidance that really helped a lot.
And it sounds like you absorbed this always. You were getting guidance along the way, but also you guided a lot of other people that went through the CKRM and the CKCK newsroom. You worked with a lot of talented people in that newsroom over the years.
Oh, I sure did. And I felt it was only my requirement to help people, to give them an idea. And there were green people, and they wouldn't have a clue about what was happening in court, and I'd have to give them a brief idea. This is what you're going to find, this is what you face. And you get nothing wrong, because it has to be right, because you can be fired if you get it wrong on air.
I just want to touch on the current situation affecting agriculture, whether it's the tariff, whether it's international relations. What's your take on that right now?
Well, I find what the President of the United States, Donald Trump, is trying to do is, I fear it's an effort to destroy the Canadian economy. It's to obtain more leverage and to control and turn us into, his words, the 51st state. So that offends me greatly. I'm very offended and upset by it. I have no intention of crossing the border unless I have to, for whatever reason, for at least 4 years, 3 years now. It may be posturing. I've been told that, but I don't see it as such. And I think the federal government is making an effort to diversify. But also, that's the other thing is, Saskatchewan has... I didn't even know we sold that much potash to the United States, that we're the key supplier of potash, because Saskatchewan soil has natural potash. So we don't really need our potash, but we are, the world's dominant supplier. So we always are shipping it to China and Japan, because those soils have been around for 2,000 years of being farmed. So of course they need potassium. They need potash. But it was such that I... think that the province of Saskatchewan is so foreign in its outlook, and by that I mean sales. I mean, we don't sell that much wheat to the United States. There's a little bit goes across the line, but there's one state of the Union produces more wheat than all of Canada. I think it's Kansas, because of high yields. It's just because of high yields. But we produce a wheat that is the best in the world. It's a blendable wheat. It makes the best loaf, the biggest, highest loaf, because of northern vigor is the best way to explain it. It's just our climate. It's our climate. It's a dry climate. We produce hard red spring wheat, which gives a loaf massive. If you've ever seen French bread, that dinky little loaf, well, that's why, like, France produces more wheat than Canada. But that's what their wheat does. It makes that funny little dinky loaf. And when I was in France, you know what we were told? You buy your baguette today because you're going to be eating it today. You don't buy it for tomorrow, because tomorrow it's dry and dead. It's awful. Our loaf lasts forever. And also, our wheat is a blendable wheat. If you add our wheat to that poor wheat of France, you get a nicer loaf. It improves whoever. Now, so we've sold our wheat to Japan, canola to Japan. Japan was our main buyer for years. Then China went, ooh, that's pretty good. We should try the canola. And they now became the dominant buyer. So we sell overseas. Saskatchewan sells potash. I mean, we were food, fuel, and fertilizer. We have what the world wants. And the fuel, I saw a story on the nuclear fuel. And Trump wants the nuclear fuel because we have it. You know, it was our nuclear fuel that probably went into the bombs originally. The world is our oyster because we supply the world with food, fuel, and fertilizer. We don't supply just the United States. Now, I'm talking about Saskatchewan, that we have a much more different look economically. Now, our only requirement is we have to have good railroads. And that's the key part, because we have to get it to Tidewater. And that's the hard part, getting it to Tidewater, because we got mountains to go through. Now, the latest find of aluminum in northeastern part of the grain belt, that's incredible. We could become a world aluminum producer. You imagine? And it's just phenomenal. And I've been in the McArthur River mine. I toured a uranium mine up north. 1996, in the late 90s, they were offering free tours for media, the uranium industry. And the part was the previous 2 years, I didn't get the free trip, right? Person in the newsroom, the legislative reporter, that's fair. They get the free trip. News director, I think. And then the third year, hey, I get the free trip. And so I went up north, and it was really weird to get on a plane at 6 in the morning and to go past Uranium City, or not Uranium City, pardon me, Lac L'Orange, and be told by the trapper beside me, that's the end. This is 96 now. That's the end of cell phone service, by the way, Jim. That's it. That spot there, we're 20 miles north of L'Orange. That's, if you're in a snow machine and you have a breakdown, you got troubles, because there's no cell phone service. Anyway, so we fly way up north to McArthur River, and the mine, they've spent $57 million, and what has happened was it's not commissioned yet. You've spent $57 million building a mine, and we go down in a giant bucket. And we have to sign waivers. You know, we aren't going down some nice little elevator. We're going down in a massive bucket. And there's about 5. They stopped in Saskatoon, pick up 2-3 journalists. And I was the journalist. And I'm probably somebody from Regina. And I go down in the mine, and it's really weird. It's almost like, and you see, safety area, and Yeah, well, we're going to show you the pumps. What do you need pumps for? Well, you can get water flooding in here. And we're 12 stories down. So we go to the news conference, right? And the guy has core samples, black, and it's all black rock, right? Black rock samples. And you're looking at them, okay, yeah, fine. And he holds it up, see this? Yeah, okay, it's a nice little black rock. He says, this is 86% pure uranium. We go, what? 86% pure? He says, yeah. And we're like, you can hold it? He said, well, yeah, I can hold it for almost an hour, and then I better put it down. And he says, the comparison, the mine that's closing in Ontario that year, 1996, the mine that's closing is 0.4%. And this is 86% pure uranium. So, 2008, I'm on a train going from Calais to Paris. And now they say the nuclear industry is clean power, right? Growing up, it was dirty energy. Nobody wanted nuclear power. It was dirty energy. You had this leftover spent rods. What do you do with it? Well, you bury it in the north for 500,000 years. But back when I was growing up, nuclear energy was, well, you don't want it. No. So there I am on a train to Paris, on a tour bus going into Paris, and I watch a train go by me. And I see him come from me, and 5 seconds later, he's going past me. And it's a bullet train in Paris, 2008. I'm going, oh my goodness. And I also knew all the companies up north that built the the uranium industry is French. They're all French companies. And I didn't really know why, but what happened was the French companies, I remembered my history. And my history when I worked in Dryden, or Fort Francis, there was the Arab-Israeli War in 1974. And the Arab-Israeli War, the Arabs cut off oil to the United States. So in January 2nd, the United States went to daylight savings time in January. So kids were getting on school buses in the dark. So, because they had no oil from the Arab countries. So only one country, though, had so little oil, they had to change their philosophy and support the Arabs instead of the Israelis. That was France. So I knew they had no oil. So what happens? There I am on this bus going into Paris, and what happens? The tour guide says, I said, that's a high-speed train. But is it electric? There's power lines overhead. She says, oh, yes, we have surplus power. We sell it to the Germans. I know where you get your power, I said. You get your power from me, from us, Saskatchewan. We're powering those trains into Paris because they have nuclear power. They have surplus power. And I remember when they didn't have surplus power. So I call it, I was on the road to Damascus when I had this I changed my, well, wait a minute, if they can sell nuclear power, you want to be living beside somebody that needs power, right? Needs energy. Well, we are beside a massive country that needs power and energy. The United States. Why not have a nuclear reactor here? So to me, that's I was converted. Nuclear energy was to me the wave of the future. Because of that, if France can do it, why can't we?
Now, your knowledge base is remarkable. Now you're retired. You're obviously traveling. You're enjoying yourself, but it sounds like you still have that love of Saskatchewan, that place to be.
Oh yes, absolutely. It's the best place in the world. The winters are a little tough. I've driven across the mountains twice in the winter. But after watching the show Highway Through Hell, I don't want to do it again because you can be delayed for a full week. But I did Dublin, Belfast, Edinburgh, and London this past spring, and really enjoyed it. Had a good trip. We did the cliffs of Moher and Edinburgh. We went to Edinburgh Castle and saw the Highlands in Scotland. It was wonderful. It was beautiful. And I went on Loch Ness. And my reaction to Loch Ness was unbelievable because, your day trip is expensive, but that's okay. You're getting to see the Highlands and now to go on Loch Ness, though, there's a little ferry ride. You pay another £30 and there was my wife and my daughter and myself. So, excuse me. £30 is, it's $50, which isn't bad, but to take a little ferry ride. But if you think I'm going to be on the edge of Loch Ness and not take the ferry ride, you're dreaming. So I take the ferry ride. But I get on the ferry and I look around and I'm on a lake with a few little hills. This is it? I was shocked at my reaction. This is it? And they had already said a couple times, if you get a picture of Nessie, £10 million. Whoa! but I didn't see Nessie.
Well, thank you so much for doing this with us. Thank you for the history and the stories and the work you did on CKRM.
Well, thank you for having me, Brad. I appreciate it very much. It's been a pleasure.